What do you think of the people who are calling you, whether it's on social media, what have you? Lots of people are calling you a monster. What do you have to say to that?
You know, they don't know the case. They don't know the case. They don't understand what's happening. They only know, they're looking from the outside in. To be inside and involved, there's people that know, and they don't know the whole story, but they know the problems that I've been through in this case, and watch me suffer. And a lot of them haven't spoke out yet.
So they don't know the whole story. So what is the whole story?
Well, I'm telling you, there's been a lot of alcoholism, especially on Denise's part, and a lot of different people she's been involved with.
Do you think she was murdered?
I mean, I do believe that. How, I don't know. Like I told them, I left the apartment complex that morning about 3 in the morning. What happened after, when I left, she was fine.
She was sleeping? She was awake?
She was sleeping, she was fine. Everything was good between us. We had, if you could look at the camera footage from the night before when we were out, we were getting along great, we were laughing. We were not having any issues.
Chase, what do you got?
He actually has an internal emotional response, this downright eye accessing again, to being called a monster on social media. This is kind of surprising, but I want you to think about this a little bit deeper. He's showing an emotional reaction to something he's unable to control or have any power over, something that is even taking power away from him. This is a big deal. We see this emotional thing all so far in this all these exact instances. And he's saying they don't know the case. They're looking from the outside in. If he's innocent, wouldn't he be looking at the case in just about the same way since he wasn't there? Just a thought. And he says there's people that know. When he thinks of these people who might have some control over the narrative, you'll see another perfect emotional accessing. These people with power over the narrative, you'll see emotional accessing the moment he mentions them. You'll see even more of these wide-eyed responses when the reporter interjects with a question. And this is more of the innocence and attention display that we talked about. One thing to note here is the effort to develop rapport is very obvious. But when, so far, have you seen a denial or an assertion that he's wrongly accused? So this semi-unconfident denial is kind of a delicate balancing act that actually requires some social intelligence. He's having to admit she might have been murdered, most likely because he believes he has to go along with the consensus. And then he also has to deny any knowledge of how it happened. So it's an interesting balancing act. So let's talk about some environmental factors here. Most experts agree that genes alone don't cause somebody to become violent or antisocial. Instead, these genetic predispositions can interact with environmental influences like childhood trauma or neglect to increase somebody's likelihood of these behaviors. So this kind of interplay between genetics and environment is often referred to as gene-environment interaction. That's the thing there. We'll talk about some more in the next one. Scott, what do you got?
All right. He pretty much continues what he's been saying so far. What's interesting, though, is when he starts locking eyes with her, watch his eye. You can see his pupils dilating these. I paid really close attention to that. And that's the first and second questions where you see that when he's laser focused, you see those pupils dilating just a little bit. When he says a lot of people say she's been involved with, he says a lot of people she's been involved with. That's when we see, again, that single shoulder shrug and that chin toward that. So he's trying to make her look really bad here. And that's a huge flag for deception when you see that happen. At the same time, we're seeing that duper's delight, which is similar to me. It looks like almost like, as Mark was talking about earlier, like kids look that way. This guy's starting to look like a child. quite often when you've had trauma when you're little, you'll revert back to that almost all the time. You'll not live in that world, but your behavior will be similar to that. And I think maybe, there was something with his parents or something, because he looks like a little kid talking about this, and he shouldn't be almost giddy during all this. Then he says he left at 3 a.m. Now, what I was waiting for was this woman to say, how often do you leave the house at 3 a.m.? Do you do that every day? How often do you leave at 3 a.m.? But she doesn't ask that. And another thing about that, about leaving at 3 a.m., he doesn't say, well, I was asleep and woke up. If you leave that early, you say, shoot, man, I got up at 2:30 because he had to get up before 3 a.m. That's just when he left. So earlier he talked about 2:30 when she'd been drinking and was drunk and all that and was making him mad. And now he's talking about leaving at 3 a.m. That must be their window for their drinking time or something, that, 11 to 2:30 or something. And maybe that's probably when this happened, since he says he left at 3. But he doesn't say, I got up and then. You always hear about people getting up at whatever time before they did something, especially in a situation like this. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah. Okay. So look, just as he says, I don't know the full case. I came into this analysis not knowing what crime has been committed. I'm learning it as we go along. So really, I'm there just analyzing what I've got here. The interviewer here says a lot of people on social media are saying you are a monster. Okay, so I'm one of those people on social media. I'm on social media right now. This is one of those people on social media. Here I am, and I don't know what he did, and so I don't really know if he's a monster or not. But based on my analysis so far. And I would say something of an opinion. You're going to see analysis and opinion together here. I would say what he certainly is a lying idiot. He's definitely lying, I would suggest. And he's definitely an idiot because he thinks he's really good at it and he's really bad at it. He's got that full Dunning-Kruger effect going on. He thinks he's better at something than he is. And Chase, I think, it's lovely to get this analysis at the same time of the genes and the environment. And of course, we all get dealt the hands that we get dealt. And there are some people who get dealt awful hands in life that they're just not in control of. Maybe him, maybe others as well, hands as bad, a little bit less bad, and some way, way worse. But what you have to remember is the majority of people on the planet actually don't commit violent acts, even though they've been dealt that hand. And so for me, character, there's personality, and people talk all the time about personality, but then there is character, which is the choices you make given the hand you've been dealt. And I would say, and the choices that you make are they're totally under your control. The hand you have, maybe not, but the choices you make are under your control. And this lying idiot is making, I think, some terrible choices. And there's a combination there of analysis and opinion, I would say. Greg, what do you got on this one?
Well, we share an opinion. This guy's an idiot. I've said idiot about 2 people in the entire history of our show, and it's been the past 3 weeks. One was Letitia Stout and this guy. I think they think they're smarter than they are, and he has been successful to get this far, to get the scene of the crash by being around people he might have been smarter than. But again, this woman is doing a great job, and he is not smarter than she is. It's an interesting kind of twist here for me, because if you watch him, again, let me point out, no grief. No grief, no grief. The only emotion we see is when he's attacked, when he's called a monster, when he's talking, Chase, to your point about other people who have some control. Well, that fits narcissism. When you'll go into fits of rage, you have shallow emotional depth, and you go into fits of rage about being insulted or attacked or that kind of thing. So, okay, I'm not surprised by that. He's self-amused at the beginning of this. You can't miss that whole upper face is all smiling and the lower face is under control. And he's pulling taffy with his eyes. By that, I mean looking and turning his head, pulling for approval. Like, yeah, I'm pretty pleased with the fact you fell for my last comment where he was disparaging his friend. When she calls him the monster, when she brings up monster, we get the guy from the very first video back. Look at that retracted smile, tightened upper lip. And I call that, if he's making hard eye contact, that's a predatory smile. If a guy is standing around looking at you and going, and you're a woman or anybody, you're probably going to go, I don't want to be part of that person, whoever it is, because it's awkward. It doesn't look natural. It looks like the person is trying to smile when they are actually there for some kind of aggression. But when she gives him a chance, he softens back to persuasion. When she asks, what's the whole story? She gives him a bone, and he softens again and goes back to her. His brow's up, and he's short nodding, persuasion again. But after this last disparaging comment about a lot of people she has been involved with, when he's talking about Denise, I think is her name, watch this. This is the single best example of what I call request for approval we've ever had in the show, for one reason. And when I say request for approval, we don't do it intentionally most of the time. It's instinctive. When I'm looking at you and say, you get it, my brow goes up. When I'm asking you for approval before I move on in the story, I do it. When I'm trying to get something past you, I'll do it. What's funny with him in this one, after he disparages, he stops, his mouth drops open slightly, and he does a hard request for approval. It rises just right there in the center. And what's interesting is it's abandoned. It's after the sentence. There's no words. It's awkward, and it is a perfect example of, you believe me, don't you? And then you see that hard pupil dilation you pointed out, Scott. He's navigating language at the very end when he's talking about, we were getting along great, no issues, and he shrinks. Look at the line behind his head. We got another Stephanie Lazarus. Look at the line behind his head and watch him shrinking as he goes through it. While he doesn't have any baggage, I want you to remember these words that he says, we got along great and there were no issues. Remember that as we move through these next videos.
One of those tape replays.
What do you think of the people who are calling you, whether it's on social media, what have you? Lots of people are calling you a monster. What do you have to say to that?
You know, they don't know the case. They don't know the case. They don't understand what's happening. They only know, they're looking from the outside in. To be inside and involved, there's people that know, and they don't know the whole story, but they know the problems that I've been through in this case, and watch me suffer. And a lot of them haven't spoke out yet.
So they don't know the whole story. So what is the whole story?
Well, I'm telling you, there's been a lot of alcoholism, especially on Denise's part, and a lot of different people she's been involved with.
Do you think she was murdered?
I mean, I do believe that. How, I don't know. Like I told them, I left the apartment complex that morning about 3 in the morning. What happened after, when I left, she was fine.
She was sleeping? She was awake?
She was sleeping, she was fine. Everything was good between us. We had, if you could look at the camera footage from the night before when we were out, we were getting along great, we were laughing. We were not having any issues.
If you like this video, get the full body language breakdown and analysis on our main channel by clicking this video right here.
You know what?